Whatever happened to Turd Flinging Monkey? Man, I remember him from way back. If you were anywhere near the manosphere corner of YouTube in the 2000s, you knew the name. Turd Flinging Monkey. MGTOW commentary, libertarian politics, evolutionary psychology dressed up as dating advice. Basically, sociology and economics with a much cruder name attached. And then, at some point, he just wasn't there anymore. No viral cancellation moment, no big news cycle. He just faded out of the mainstream feed. So, what actually happened to him? Turns out the answer says a lot about how deplatforming actually works in practice, and it's not the story you'd expect. Before we get to the disappearing act, it's worth remembering how big this guy actually got and his rise. At his peak, Turd Flinging Monkey was arguably the most recognizable commentator in the manosphere space, bigger than contemporaries like Stardust or Sandman. He built his channel around long-form streams and monologues, working through ideas about relationships, economics, and gender dynamics through a mix of personal narrative and pop evolutionary psychology framing. Part of what made him distinct from the pack was the persona work. He wasn't just doing talking head political commentary. He built out an entire ongoing bit around a girlfriend, a synthetic companion named Celestina, who he framed as a co-host and at times a running commentary on AI and robotic stories. Whether you found that endearing or unsettling probably depended entirely on your priors going in, but it made him memorable in a sea of very similar sounding red pill channels. Section 2. The strikes. The turning point came in late 2019. YouTube's moderation had been steadily tightening around manosphere and red pill content for a couple of years by that point, and TFM's channel started accumulating community guideline strikes. Eventually, he lost the ability to monetize and functionally the ability to keep operating the way he had been. Here's the part that's actually interesting from a media ecosystem standpoint. He didn't fight to stay on YouTube. He left. He announced the move and relocated his primary content to BitChute, a video platform built specifically as a haven for creators pushed off mainstream platforms. That's the pattern worth sitting with for a second. This wasn't a creator getting quietly shadow banned into irrelevance. It was a full, deliberate migration, a preview of a strategy that a lot of politically controversial creators would adopt over the following few years as platform moderation kept tightening. So here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because TFM didn't just move to one alternative platform. He built out an entire redundant distribution network. As of now, he's simultaneously active across BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble, MGTOW.TV, PeerTube, DLive, Trovo, and a handful of others. His old YouTube channel still technically exists, but it's been repurposed into something almost ceremonial, used only for sponsored review content and stream announcements, a tripwire pointed at the platforms where his actual audience lives now. Financially, he never depended on YouTube ad revenue to begin with, at least not by the time the strikes hit. His income runs through direct support platforms, Subscribestar and Patreon, which decoupled his livelihood from any single platform's algorithm or advertiser sensibilities. That's arguably the real lesson here. Platform exile only works as a punishment if the creator's business model depends on the platform. TFM's didn't, so the deplatforming barely touched his actual operation. And he's still going. This is maybe the most surprising part if you haven't checked in on him in years. He's still enormously active. There's a whole content schedule running, a weekly flagship stream, a Wednesday show, a companion series covering news commentary. He's syndicating the same content across half a dozen platforms simultaneously, which is a level of operational redundancy you don't see from most independent creators. The subscriber numbers on his surviving YouTube channel look modest next to his peak, tens of thousands rather than the reach he had before the strikes. But that number is misleading if you're trying to gauge his actual audience, because it's only counting one output pipe out of many. The honest picture is a creator who lost the biggest megaphone in the room, but kept, maybe even strengthened, the actual community underneath it. There's a broader pattern that is worth zooming out on, because TFM's trajectory is basically a case study you can apply to a whole generation of politically controversial creators. The instinct from outside the ecosystem is usually to assume deplatforming equals disappearance. that losing your YouTube channel means losing your audience, your income, your relevance. But what actually tends to happen is closer to what played out here: a forced migration to alt-tech infrastructure, a diversification of both platforms and revenue streams, and, counterintuitively, a more resilient, more insulated position than the creator had before. The audience doesn't evaporate, it follows. And once it's followed once, it's a lot harder for any single platform's moderation decision to touch that creator again. So, what happened to Turd Flinging Monkey? Nothing really. Not in the sense that happened usually implies. He got pushed off the platform that made him a known name, built a redundant multi-platform operation that no single company can touch, and kept talking to the same audience for years afterward. If there's a lesson in here, it's probably this: platform bans are really good at controlling discovery. They're a lot less effective at controlling retention once an audience has already decided to follow you somewhere else.